And Brad, everyone in Washington is buzzing about a very important thing. The U.S. has reached our debt ceiling, which means something. Look, let's get started with the basics and separate two commonly confused concepts. The deficit is when a country spends more money on things like entitlements and national security than it takes in, mostly through taxes. To make up for that deficit, the government then borrows money, which means it accrues debt. So the deficit is a yearly measure of how much the government is in the red, while the debt is the total amount that we owe stacked up over time. That debt number right now is up over $31 trillion, which is admittedly a very large and scary amount that has been climbing for years. The national debt has been the subject of many political debates and ads like this one from 2010.
Compoundable with higher taxes and lower pay until the day we die.
American taxpayers owe more than $500 million in interest payments every day to cover our government's debt. Much of that debt is owed to foreign governments. Go to defeatthedebt.com.
Debt stinks.
But how exactly did we get all of this debt? Well, prior to the coronavirus pandemic, most of that debt was thanks to long, steady growth in social programs like Medicare and Social Security, which have broad support from the American public. Many economists say that going into debt to fund programs like these can be a positive outcome for the U.S., and that debt isn't necessarily a bad thing if the country is spending that money on the right things. But that hasn't stopped a contingent of congressional Republicans from looking to cut entitlement programs to reduce the spending and pay off America's debts. Representative Kevin Hern of the Republican Study Committee told the Washington Post, quote, "We have no choice but to make hard decisions, and that everybody has to look at everything." Which brings us to the debt ceiling. The Constitution says that only Congress has the authority to authorize borrowing against the nation's full faith and credit, a routine process that's known as raising the debt limit. But Republican-controlled House of Representatives is signaling that they won't sign off on raising the debt limit until Democrats in the Senate and President Biden agree to a drastic reduction in federal spending, including potential cuts to Social Security and Medicare, which Democrats say will not happen. One congressional aide told Vanity Fair, quote, "Anyone who tells you that they know what the off-ramp here looks like is bluffing." Here's what White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre had to say about the ongoing negotiations.
As President Biden has made clear, Congress must deal with the debt limit and must do so without conditions. But congressional Republicans are threatening to hold the nation's full faith and credit, a mandate of the Constitution, hostage to their demands to cut Social Security, to cut Medicare, and to cut Medicaid. Brinksmanship that threatens the global economy.
So what happens if Congress doesn't raise the debt ceiling? Well, it could mean that the country would default on its debts for the first time in history. Virginia Democrat Don Beyer, a representative and chairman of the Joint Economic Committee in Congress, says that, quote, "If we defaulted, there would almost certainly be a worldwide recession, and a recession in America much deeper than in 2008 and 2009, with a minimum of 1 million people losing their jobs." Now, Tegan and Brad, this is a bit of an understatement here, but this situation does not look good right now.
It absolutely does not. You know, like you said, the first time this would happen in history. And now we saw that we hit our debt limit on January 19th. What's being done to avoid this thing that has never happened before with, Congress at a standstill?
Yeah, so right now we've obviously hit that cap on the amount of money the American government can borrow. So the Treasury Department, headed up by Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, announced that they'd be taking what they call extraordinary measures to prevent the United States from defaulting on its debts, moving around billions of dollars in order to be able to maintain the government spending and keep all of our programs in place. But they can only do that for so long.